Good morning, friends. Welcome to Wyck. I've been expecting you. We've got some baking to do for the New Year's tea, so please come join. So what I've done before, and what you'll need to do before, is to make a very simple dough the day before and let it ripen covered in a plastic bag in the refrigerator. Butter, sugar, spices. I pulled down our little spice cabinet here just to show you. So nutmeg and cloves, caraway seeds, which we will discuss later. The most important thing at this point is our mold. So this is a reproduction from the 19th century. I will show you the older one. This one we're allowed to use. So basically, we've got the dough, and it's really heavy, really strong. So we work it, we get a little flour onto the mold just to make it release. I'm going to put a little on the dough itself, and then get it started, yes, like Play-Doh, get it started with your fingers. And there's no real right or wrong here, but we can get it fairly thin on the mold. Some molds, especially those German print molds, you put the mold on the cookie. This seems to work best with this white metal one, is to do it this way. So I'm just going to keep playing with it. We need to go out to the edge of the ruffle on the pattern. And then I won't take it the whole way out. In another second it would be out where I want it and where it's thin enough. I'm just going to pull this off so that you see that it's not really difficult. So what I did to give you a little insurance is to make one or two and bake those. We can always work a little flour into the dough to make sure that it's nice and stiff. But you see that it's taken the imprint pretty easily. So I'm going to pop these into the oven. These are going to be my tests, and we'll continue. So if you're fortunate to have one of these molds, super. If not, don't let that discourage you. You might have speculous molds from the German at home. Let's just go ahead and use some cookie cutters. So I've rolled that out. Just punch out, just as you would do a sugar cookie. Now, I've pulled out a couple old cookie cutters. Because here at Wyck we were a Quaker family, I kept the most simple ones, a little biscuit one, and my grandma's heart-shaped one. They both work really well, really simple. So just punch those out like regular cookies, and we'll put those on a sheet and bake those in the same way we did the larger ones. Got it? The oldest receipt book that we have in the collection belongs to Hannah Marshall Haynes. And this notebook is from 1811 to 1813. The New Year's cake recipe that's in there is credited to the initials AC. We don't know who that person is. But the next reference, and as much history as we have here, because it includes the mold that Jane brings from New York when she marries Reuben. So she is Jane Bown Haynes. The book is dated 1810 to 1840, so a nice long 30-year gap. Another interesting thing is that I'm going to call it a flip manuscript, because if you go one way in the book, it's Jane's. And in a goofy way, if you flip it and come back the other way, it's recipes from her cousin Anne. So they were both living in the house. Both of those women notate 3 different recipes for this New Year's cake. So even from the very beginning, when Jane brings that mold, the recipe varies and varies and varies again. One thing, a sort of quotable here, the lens through which a family's life is viewed shifts from time to time. Now, when we look at this through one little cookie, this New Year's cake that we're discussing, we see that the science of that is changing as well as the tastes and flavorings in that one little cookie. So let's go back to Jane. She's new to town. She's got the mold. She's in the new house with her husband. She's going to start baking. Now, the tradition of this, again through Dr. Weaver and his research, is that the cookie comes from New York State, New York City, with the Dutch. Let me give you Hannah's recipe. In 6 pounds of flour, rub 1.5 pounds of butter, 3.5 of sugar, and 1 ounce of caraway seeds, a piece of potash about the size of a nutmeg. Mix these together with warm milk, enough to make a soft dough. Roll it into thin cakes and bake crisp. The potash must be dissolved in milk. What's interesting, if you look at those, and we're going to flip to Jane and Anne's recipes, the science changes through this. From potash to pearl ash to a very fancy crossword puzzle word, celeritis, to we jump to the 20th century, then we know what that stuff is. It's baking soda. So just to give you a quick lesson in science, what they needed to do was take a salt or an alkali, add water and heat to make bubbles. So this history of leavening, we could do it with whipping egg whites, we could do it with yeast. Those feel sort of familiar to us. This was done chemically. So potash, pearl ash, celeritis, these are all like bicarbonate salts and alkalis to give us little bubbles, little carbon dioxide bubbles. By the time we get to the end of the 19th century with Hannah Haynes' bacon recipe, she's using baking soda. So that feels very familiar. One of the receipts we have, and it's fun that it's Caspar Wister Haynes, so the men in the family were also cooking and writing this recipe down. Caspar Wister Haynes' diary entry of January 4th, so here we are at New Year's week, 1913, his recipe uses pearl ash. So he's looking at an older recipe.
Jane B. Haynes came a little after 10 a.m. She and I made up and baked 70 New Year's cakes. The first were rolled rather too thick, but we made the remainder very thin. The recipe is from Grandmother's book. 7 pounds flour, 3 pounds sugar, 2 pounds butter, 1 quart cream, 1 teaspoon pearl ash, 1 glass brandy, 1 glass wine, caraway seed, and spice to your liking.
So I also want to take a minute and tell you what this cookie tastes like. Take the idea of cookie out of your head. Take chocolate chip cookies and snickerdoodles out of your head. We're talking about another little creature here, much like you would eat a wine biscuit or one of those not very sweet biscuits to eat with tea. Will Weaver again notices, I think he even calls it an ale biscuit, an ale cake, because it would taste really good with a warm Guinness. It would taste really good with a cup of tea. It's not very sweet at all, partially because sugar was expensive. So we're gonna take that amount of cheap sugar out of this cookie. But we're also not going to serve it with punch. It doesn't fall into that kind of a place in entertaining. So very little sugar, a little cinnamon, a little nutmeg. All the recipes sort of say spices to preference. So ginger, nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves pop up in all the recipes. The fun thing that I think, and it really sets it apart once you let the cookie sit overnight and ripen in a cookie tin, is that there's caraway seeds in there. So there's a savory touch that kind of just leans you to beer and tea and coffee versus a glass of milk and a chocolate chip cookie. So the funny thing is, and we'll make reference to Bill Curry here today too, is that he has left, when he was baking, and he's the most recent baker of the cookies, he left the caraway seeds out. Now, I thought there was something historical and very important about that. The sort of whimsy of it is that the caraway seeds got stuck in his mother's teeth. So there's one of those little oral history things. Oh, literally oral history. Sorry about that. One of those little oral histories that we would have missed that in a note, but we have him telling us that his mother left it out because the seeds got stuck in her teeth. Newer recipes also have goofy things in them. There's a little brandy in one. There's even a little Kahlua. Obviously from the 20th century recipe, there's even Kahlua in one. So obviously a personal recipe, an ongoing recipe. I have thrown those caraway seeds back in. I like the savory touch of that. I truly wish you were here with me and us this year. It's been a rough one. We don't have to speak of that. But if you were here, I'd like to know what food traditions you share with your family. That one cookie that you make only one time a year, that would be fun. That's what's really quite magnificent about this place, is it's evergreen. It's always alive, always moving. I've said it in other videos, we are not a museum. So I'm terribly missing you this year. Quite from the heart. So, you know what? Close your eyes really tight. If you smell, you will smell black tea and oranges. If you listen very carefully, you'll hear voices and the doorbell ringing, and we'll have this party again next year. So, from all of us here, I'm going to wish you a very happy and healthy new year. Again, we will see you next year. Thank you, friends.